The fork trembled in Harold's hand, though the room was warm and quiet. A week ago they had buried Martha. Tonight her daughter and son-in-law were carving up the rest. Perry reclined with practiced ease at the head of the table, no longer a guest, but a man staking a claim. "Now that your wife has died," he said, "grieve, pack your bags, and never come back here again." Sienna nodded. Her silence was worse than any insult. "The house was never really yours anyway." Harold rose slowly, his chest hollowed by grief, his gaze steady. He did not protest, did not beg, did not break. Instead, he left his own home without a word and drove into the night, not toward a suitcase, but toward a vault. Martha had been kind, but she had not been naive. Inside the safe deposit box she made him promise never to open without cause. Harold found a sealed envelope with a single sentence written in her hand. "If they turn on you, use this. If you've ever been written off, pushed aside, or told to leave your own story, hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment below if you've ever had to prove someone wrong without saying a word. And let me know, where in the world are you watching from?" The roast cooled on the table, untouched. 7 days had passed since Martha's funeral, and still Harold moved like a man missing parts of himself. The family dinner had been his idea, a way to remember her, a way to reclaim something steady in the silence. But now, in the dining room they had shared for more than 2 decades, something unrecognizable unfolded. Across the table, Perry leaned back in the chair that used to be Martha's. He spoke with a rehearsed calm. The words were already prepared. "Now that your wife has died, grieve, pack your bags, and never come back here again." Harold blinked, not in disbelief, in confirmation he had heard correctly. Beside Perry, Sienna nodded. Her eyes never rose from her plate. Her hands stayed busy with the stem of a wineglass she had barely touched. The same daughter who had once cried. For hours, when Harold accidentally crushed a bird's nest with the lawnmower, now acted as though her father's entire world was just clutter to be cleared. "The house was never really yours. Anyway," the words were sharper than Perry's, colder, more final, as if Harold himself was already buried beside Martha. He placed his fork down carefully, though his fingers wanted to tremble. He looked around the room, the curtains Martha had sewn in her last healthy months, the photos hung in mismatched frames, the wooden floor still scuffed from Sienna's first tricycle. 23 years of a life lived in full color, reduced to a logistics problem by 2 people with a mortgage they could barely manage. His voice, when it came, was quiet, steady. "I see." Perry took that as a win. "Good. We will help you look at some places tomorrow. Something appropriate, small, manageable." Sienna finally looked up. But the eyes that met Harold's were no longer Martha's eyes. They were borrowed by something else, something transactional. "It will be better this way, Dad, for everyone." Better. Harold stood. He did not argue. He did not cry. He did not ask why. That part of him had been hollowed out already. Instead, he reached for his jacket in the hallway closet and slid it on like armor. Behind him, Perry chuckled with the confidence of a man who thought he had just claimed a deed. "Smart choice, Harold." Harold said nothing. The door closed behind him with a soft click. It did not slam. Slamming was for anger. This was colder than anger. This was design. Outside, the desert air wrapped around him, dry and still. He walked to the car he had bought 10 years ago, the same year he paid off the final mortgage on the house they now wanted him to vacate. He started the engine and drove. Not home, not anymore, and not to pack a single thing. Instead, he headed toward something Martha had once told him about, in that quiet voice she used when the subject was difficult. "There is a deposit box in the vault at Desert Community Bank. Only open it if something breaks that cannot be fixed." At the time, he thought she had meant her illness, the long goodbye they had both endured in silence. But now he understood. Martha had not been afraid of dying. She had been afraid of what might happen after. The vault was still open when he arrived. They knew him by name. Retired vice president, 35 years of loyal service. They had attended Martha's funeral. They offered condolences as they escorted him down the familiar hallway. Box 233. He signed the slip, turned the dual keys, and opened the metal drawer that held something heavier than gold. Inside was a single envelope. His name was written on the front in Martha's handwriting. He opened it slowly. Inside were two items, a notarized legal document and a note. The note read, "If they turn on you, use this." No hesitation. No forgiveness. I saw it coming before you did. Love, M. He unfolded the document. His breath slowed. It was real. It was devastating. And it changed everything. Outside the bank, night had fallen. The desert wind had picked up, whispering through the empty parking lot like a warning. Harold stood under the flickering streetlight and reread the clause. Twice. Then, he pulled out his phone and began typing. A new entry into the Notes app. Phase 1. Awareness. Complete. Phase 2. Leverage. Begins tomorrow. He slid the phone back into his coat pocket and looked out across the street. His reflection stared back at him in the bank's darkened window. Not a broken man. Not a widower. Not a victim. Just a man who had been underestimated. Inside the coat pocket, the edge of Martha's letter pressed against his ribs like a knife made of paper. He turned, walked toward his car, and drove into the desert night. He did not look back. The safe deposit box closed behind him with a mechanical thud, sealing away the last of who he used to be. Harold sat in the leather chair. Martha had insisted they keep, despite its worn arms and faded seams. She had said it felt like home. Now it felt like an empty throne. The house had gone silent again, but it was no longer the silence of grief. It was a waiting silence, a silence pregnant with decision. The sealed envelope now rested on the coffee table, its contents reread twice since returning from the bank. He had not called Sienna. He had not responded to the text she sent late that night. Her message had been short, almost cheerful. Hope you found a place to stay, Dad. Let me know if you need help boxing things up. Love you. He stared at the message until the phone screen dimmed. Then he turned it off entirely. Morning came with the same relentless desert sun. The same garden Martha had once tended bloomed obediently, as if unaware of the betrayal that had bloomed inside the house. Harold brewed his coffee the same way he always had. 2 scoops, no sugar, just strength. He brought the mug to his desk and opened the drawer where he kept his records. Martha had always teased him about his obsessive documentation. Receipts, statements, tax folders organized by year. But Martha had also known the value of a well-kept paper trail. Trust, she used to say, should come with a receipt. He pulled out the thick file marked Sienna. At first, it had been tuition checks, $89,000 over 4 years. Tuition, books, housing, meal plans, every line item neatly recorded. He had never hesitated, not once. Her future was a better investment than any portfolio. He turned the pages. Next came the house down payment, $65,000 wired directly into escrow. They had been short after the bank denied them a mortgage. Perry's credit score had been too low, Sienna's income too unstable. They had come crying, literally. Sienna's eyes had been red, her voice hoarse. We'll pay you back, Dad, with interest. No repayments ever came. But Harold never asked. Pride and love had a way of keeping silent tallies. He flipped further. The wedding. $23,000. Martha had insisted on it, even when the medical bills had begun to surface. It's her only wedding, Harold. Let's make it count. It had counted. He still remembered the father-daughter dance, Sienna whispering in his ear how lucky she was, how grateful, how she would take care of them one day. He reached the last few entries. Car repairs, emergency dental work, Perry's failed business loan. $38,000 in total, $215,000 lost $215,000. Enough to rebuild this house. Enough to retire twice. Enough to drown in if you never saw it coming. He stood and walked to the filing cabinet where Martha had kept her personal papers. In the back, behind their joint insurance policies, he found a slim black notebook. Her handwriting. Fewer jokes. More precision. Inside the front cover, she had written, "If you ever need to remember why you matter more than money, read this." He turned the pages. It was a log of everything Harold had done for the family. Not in dollars. In moments, Sienna's first recital. He left a board meeting to attend. Perry's job loss. Harold helped rewrite his resume. Martha's treatment plan. Harold took notes, tracked side effects, handled every insurance call. She had logged it all, because she had known Harold wouldn't. Because he would see only the numbers, not the soul behind them. He closed the notebook and set it beside the financial records. 2 stories, one in ledgers, one in love. and yet both pointed to the same conclusion. They had forgotten who he was. The text came mid-morning. "We found a great senior living place in Tempe. They have a tour opening this Friday. Want us to schedule it for you?" He did not reply. Instead, he opened a blank legal pad and drew a line down the center. Left column, money given. Right column, trust lost. The right column filled faster. That afternoon, he walked to the garage and opened the old filing chest where his banking credentials had been stored, his CFP certification, his analyst credentials. Even in retirement, he had maintained his subscriptions to credit monitoring services and financial legal journals. His fingers moved like they had never stopped. Patterns emerged. Debt-to-income ratios, cosigner liabilities, home equity loan exposure, business loan guarantees. He logged into his monitoring service. 3 hits in the last week. All on credit inquiries from lenders, all denied. Sienna and Perry were fishing for rescue already. Desperation, masked in Sunday roasts and polite eviction notices. He copied the alerts and added them to a new folder. Title, Active Fire. The phone buzzed again. "Hey, Dad!" "Perry's talking to someone at the credit union about getting you a quote on movers. Just trying to help. Let us know if you want boxes." "Boxes?" He smiled. A small, cruel smile. They still thought he was packing. They had no idea what was coming. Outside, the sun sank behind the mountains. Shadows stretched across Martha's rose garden. The same roses she used to say thrived under 2 conditions: enough water and the occasional ruthless pruning. Harold watched the flowers sway in the breeze and made his decision. Tomorrow, he would visit James Morrison at the bank. His old colleague, his old territory, not to plead, not to ask, to open doors they thought were sealed forever. In the silence of the fading day, he opened Martha's notebook one more time and underlined a sentence with slow precision. "Love is not a debt, but betrayal is." Desert Community Bank still smelled like money and fresh paper. Harold walked through the lobby with the calm of a man returning to an old battlefield. Suits passed him by, younger, faster, noisier, but none with deeper roots than his. For 35 years he had worked behind the curtain of this machine, watching lives rise and fall on the strength of their planning or the weakness of their denial. James Morrison was already waiting in the corner office. The same oak desk, the same navy tie. Harold had hired him a decade ago, mentored him for 6. "Harold, I was sorry to hear about Martha. She was—" Harold nodded once. "Thank you. She was everything." James leaned forward, hands folded. "What brings you in?" Harold set down a printed list of account numbers. "These are loans I co-signed or guaranteed. I want their current status." James blinked. "All right. That's unusual, but legal. Let me check." Fingers tapped on the keyboard. The screen blinked, then scrolled. James's expression shifted from courtesy to concern. "Well, the mortgage on your daughter's house has been irregular. 3 months behind. There's also a home equity line they opened 6 months ago. That's maxed at $45,000. That affects your liability, Harold." "Home equity line? I never signed for that." "You did not need to. Your name is still on the original title guarantee. As long as your credit was attached, the bank processed it." Harold's jaw didn't move. He simply nodded again. "What else?" James hesitated. "The construction loan under Perry's business name. Morgan Contracting, LLC. $78,000. Defaulted 4 months ago. Accrued interest has pushed it into 6 figures." He turned the screen slightly. "Total liability exposure. $126,000. If these go into full default." James continued. "The house goes into foreclosure within 90 days. Your credit is already affected. Mildly for now. So they've built a life on credit backed by me. And they have already started defaulting." James nodded grimly. "There is more. Perry filed for business bankruptcy 2 weeks ago. Chapter 11. It protects him, but not you." Harold exhaled. "Not a sigh. More like a reset. I will need printed reports on all of it." "For legal purposes." James nodded. "I will have them ready by close of day." When Harold returned home, he placed the printed folder next to Martha's notebook. The symmetry was jarring. One folder, love given; the other, trust betrayed. The following morning, a text arrived from Sienna. It came earlier than usual. "Dad, we found a lovely assisted living place in Tempe, more appropriate than that big empty house. Can we schedule a tour for tomorrow?" No mention of financial stress. No hint of panic. Just the illusion of concern, wrapped in a logistical update. He did not respond. Instead, he went to the garage and opened the steel lockbox where he kept emergency cash and copies of legal records. Inside were 2 documents Martha had insisted on filing years ago. The first, power of attorney, now expired. The second, a trust document that had never been activated. It was tied to the ownership of the house. Martha had included a clause that could be triggered under one condition. If her surviving spouse was removed from the property by family force, it was her version of a dead man's switch. Harold filed it with the other documents and resumed writing. Each page of the yellow legal pad was now numbered, not in random ideas but in phases. Phase 1, awareness, complete. Phase 2, leverage, in progress. Phase 3, isolation, upcoming. By early afternoon, the phone rang. Sienna again. He answered. "Hi, Dad. Did you get my message about Tempe?" "I did." Her voice was hopeful. "Wonderful. We thought Friday might be good. It is a beautiful place. Pools, gardens, on-site medical. Everything." "I see." There was a pause. "You sound off. Are you and Perry experiencing financial difficulties?" Another pause, longer, thicker. "Why would you ask that?" "Because I am your father, and because I have received notification of 3 credit inquiries on accounts I co-signed. I do not know what to say." "You could try honesty." "We are working through some things. Construction slowed. Some bills piled up, but we are handling it, I hope so." Another silence. "Do you still want to tour the Tempe facility?" "No, I am not going anywhere." Sienna inhaled sharply. Her voice cracked. "Dad, this house is too big for you. You will be lonely here. You are vulnerable. I will let you know if I need assistance." He ended the call. Her follow-up message arrived within minutes. "I am sorry if we pushed too hard." Perry was stressed. "We both were. We love you. We want what is best, what is best." They were now on the edge of financial collapse, and they had gambled that Harold would fold under pressure. They had failed to calculate one critical factor. He knew the rules better than they did. By the end of the day, he had spoken to 3 contacts from his old life, 2 attorneys, and 1 investigator. Nothing extreme, just gathering information. The final message he sent that night was to his financial lawyer. Subject line: activating Clause 16. No body text, no further explanation. Just the phrase Martha had written on the envelope. "If they turn on you, use this." That night, Harold sat in silence, staring at the glowing screen of his laptop as legal documents began uploading into cloud storage. In 3 days, he would no longer be the man they thought they could evict. By Wednesday morning, Harold had finished organizing the package. Not a care package, not a gift. A dossier. Inside it were all the tools needed to apply pressure without lifting a finger. Item 1. The full breakdown of the mortgage delinquency. Item 2. Perry's business loan default documentation. Item 3. The cosigner exposure letter prepared by James at the bank. Item 4. Martha's trust clause. Scanned and notarized. Item 5. A handwritten letter. Brief, polite, surgical. To whom it may concern, the undersigned requests official acknowledgement that the home located at 248 Cypress Hollow Lane has entered active foreclosure risk due to loan delinquency and equity misuse. Please update the attached guarantor with legal notifications going. Forward. Harold folded the packet carefully and mailed it. Certified to the loan servicer. They would understand the message. And so would Sienna, soon enough. That afternoon, he returned to his desk and opened the folder labeled Phase 2. Inside were names and numbers. Former clients, fellow bankers, old city contacts. Not friends, assets. He began making calls. The first was to David Marsh, Regional Compliance Director for Southwest Insurance Group. "David, this is Harold Butler. I am consulting again. Informal work. One question for you. Do you carry workers' comp on Desert Vista Construction?" David did not hesitate. "We do. Why?" "They have 2 late payments. A third means we report to the bond issuer. If they default, coverage lapses. That is helpful. I appreciate it." The second call was to Sarah Adams in Municipal Licensing. Her voice still had the sing-song quality Harold remembered. Desert Vista. She echoed when he inquired. Yes, we flagged them for incomplete safety submissions on their last project. Not serious yet, but repetitive violations could delay inspection schedules. He thanked her and hung up. Each fact was small on its own, but pressure points were never about force. They were about timing. Later that day, Harold returned to the coffee shop where local business chatter still circulated. He had not been gone long enough to be forgotten, just long enough to feel underestimated. Margaret Walsh from First National slid into the booth beside him with a warm smile. I heard you lost Martha. I am sorry, Harold. She was one of the best. She was, he replied, and I am just starting to move forward. Part of that includes reviewing a potential loan co-signature. For who? Perry Morgan. Margaret's smile flattened. We reviewed his application yesterday. High debt to income. Business bankruptcy. Denied immediately. Not creditworthy. Would you mind sharing that information with anyone else reviewing him? Margaret leaned in. Between us, that man's financial profile is a cautionary tale. I would not lend him coffee money. Harold returned home before sunset. The roses were blooming again. It was unseasonably warm for early March. Martha would have insisted they trim the petals back to encourage hardier stems. Life needed pruning, she always said. Kindness did not mean softness. The next day, the first alerts came in. 3 denied loan applications. Harold reviewed the alerts without emotion. Perry and Sienna were scrambling, applying to every lender in town, likely unaware that their name now carried an invisible weight. Not fraud, not slander, just risk, carefully contextualized by a man who had once trained analysts on how to assess it. That evening, the text arrived. Dad, I do not want to sound panicked, but we really need to talk. Can we come over tomorrow? He replied, yes, noon. He did not ask questions. He did not offer help. He did not send directions. Let them squirm. Let them arrive uncertain. Friday they appeared. Both in casual clothes. Perry's collar was wrinkled. Sienna's face was pale. They looked less like conquerors now and more like people inching toward the edge of something very dark. Harold welcomed them in without warmth. They sat across from him on the same couch where they had once opened wedding. Gifts. Sienna broke first. Dad, we are in trouble. I know. She blinked. How much do you know? Enough to understand your mortgage is in default. Enough to know your equity line was maxed without disclosing it to your guarantor. Enough to know Perry's company is functionally dead. Perry flinched. That is not fair. Neither was telling a grieving man to pack his bags and disappear. Sienna reached for his hand. We are sorry. We handled that horribly. But now we need help. If we lose the house, we have nowhere to go. No credit. No backup. We need $40,000. Perry added. Harold said nothing for a long time. You have already received over $200,000 from me. None of it returned. Most of it forgotten. This is different, Dad. We will sign anything. Legal paperwork, terms, just please. Harold stood, walked to the window. The roses were swaying. When he turned back, his voice was made of stone. I will consider helping. Under 3 conditions. Perry's eyes narrowed. What conditions? 1. Public acknowledgement that your actions toward me were cruel. A written apology, submitted to the HOA newsletter and posted on your social accounts. You want us to humiliate ourselves? I want truth. In writing, Sienna nodded slowly. Okay. What else? 2. Financial transparency. I want access to your payment records, your debts, your income. You will follow my advice. If I say downsize, you downsize. If I say cut spending, you obey. You want control. I want proof you can be trusted with what you are asking for. They both nodded, cornered but desperate. And 3. Counseling, together, weekly, documented attendance. Silence. That is, Perry stammered, extreme. So is betrayal. Harold returned to his chair, opened a new checkbook. I will write $25,000, not 40. Enough to stop the immediate collapse, not enough to fund another lie. We accept, Sienna whispered. Perry said nothing, but nodded. Good. He tore the check and set it on the table between them. You will get this once the apology is public. Until then, we have nothing further to discuss. He stood and walked them to the door. They did not argue. They left with heads bowed, the check untouched. Outside, the wind picked up slightly, rustling the petals of the blooming roses. Martha's voice seemed to whisper from the past. Sometimes pruning was not punishment. It was protection. That night, Harold reviewed the draft of their apology before bed. It needed work, but the first cut always did. The apology arrived Sunday morning, tucked into Harold's inbox between utility bills and a neighborhood newsletter. Sienna had written it. That much was obvious. Her tone wavered between forced contrition and barely veiled discomfort. Perry's name appeared only once, buried in a sentence structured to place blame on stress, timing, and misunderstandings. Harold read it twice. It lacked weight. He opened a blank document and began typing edits. Not grammatical corrections, not phrasing tweaks, structural repair. He inserted missing facts, removed deflections, replaced vague regret with precise accountability. When he was finished, the piece was 52 words longer and infinitely sharper. He replied to Sienna with one line, "This is the version I will accept. You may post it by end of day." She did not respond right away. The silence stretched into evening. By the time the revised post appeared on her social page, Harold had already archived a screenshot of the original. He did not trust permanence, especially not when it came from people who had turned family into negotiation. The next morning, a message arrived. It was brief. Too brief, posted. "Do you want to meet today?" Harold ignored it for 4 hours. Then finally he replied, "Yes, come at 4. No early arrivals. I will not open the door until then." At 4 o'clock sharp they arrived. This time they brought nothing. No printouts, no bags, not even a second draft of excuses, just themselves. Diminished, strained, and more watchful than before. Harold gestured toward the living room. They obeyed silently. "Before we go any further," he began, "I want to clarify something. The check I offered last week was not a grant. It was a demonstration." Perry frowned. "Of what? Of control?" Sienna inhaled. "Dad, we did everything you asked. You did the minimum." Perry's mouth twitched. "We thought this was about making amends." "It is, but not on your schedule, or your terms, and certainly not on your interpretation of what help looks like." They sat straighter. Harold pulled a folder from his desk and laid it on the coffee table. Inside were copies of their loan applications, debt summaries, and Perry's bankruptcy notice, all highlighted, all time-stamped. "This is what I reviewed before agreeing to see you last week. This is what the banks see. This is what employers eventually see." Perry leaned forward. "You have no right to. I have every right. I am listed as guarantor on 4 of these. I have legal exposure to all of them." "You are trying to shame us," Sienna said quietly. "No, I am reminding you of your position. Because that position determines what comes next." He slid a new document forward. "This is a binding agreement. $25,000 in emergency assistance, structured as a loan, collateralized by your home, monthly oversight, payment schedule, accountability." Sienna picked it up, scanning fast. Her hand trembled slightly. "You want us to sign this before we receive the money?" "I do. What if we do not? Then we are finished. You may try elsewhere, but you will find few willing to step in at this point." Perry rubbed his forehead. "And if we sign? Then I will release the funds. One installment now, another in 60 days, final amount after verified progress." "What kind of progress?" "Budget reduction, debt management, therapy documentation, proof of employment or attempts." Perry looked up. "That's not support. That's surveillance. That is strategy. You do not need sympathy. You need structure." Silence settled again. Then Sienna nodded slowly. "We will sign it." Harold handed them pens. They signed. When they were gone, check in hand and eyes downcast, Harold returned to his desk. He opened a private spreadsheet titled Timeline. Strategic Recovery. He checked off 2 boxes. Apology. Published, complete.contract, signed, complete. Phase 2 was nearing completion, but Phase 3 would be different. It was no longer about control. It was about consequence. That evening, Harold returned to Martha's notebook. He read through the lines she had written over the years. Notes to herself, little comments about Sienna's habits, Perry's temper, dinner conversations that had made her uneasy long before Harold had noticed. "They think you are soft because you do not raise your voice," she had written once. "They mistake silence for surrender." Harold smiled faintly. Martha had seen it all coming. The next morning, he contacted Rebecca, Sienna's college friend, a woman Harold remembered fondly from holiday visits. He asked for a favor, just a conversation. Rebecca agreed to meet for coffee. She arrived 10 minutes late, breathless but warm. "Your daughter looked up to you so much in school," she said, stirring her drink. "But lately, I do not know. Something's changed in her. Has she asked you for money?" Rebecca blushed. "Yes, twice. Small amounts. I gave it both times, but now I just can't. Not again. Did she mention anything about my finances?" Rebecca hesitated. "Only that you were being stubborn, that you had the money, but were refusing to help out of spite." Harold thanked her gently and paid for the coffee. That evening, he reviewed his credit monitoring service. 4 more alerts. They were still applying, still drowning, still pretending he was the one holding them underwater. By Wednesday, the shift had begun. Sienna's tone changed. Her messages grew polite, neutral, transactional, checking in, letting you know we made our first counseling appointment. "Hey, just confirming we are on for next review. Dad, we appreciate this more than you know." No warmth, no real remorse, just maintenance. They had signed the agreement, but still did not understand the lesson. So Harold prepared the final phase. It began with one quiet visit to his lawyer. "We are going to activate the clause in Martha's will," he said. "The one about misuse of assets and attempted coercion." The lawyer raised an eyebrow. "That triggers the trust clause, you realize." "I do. And it moves the house into charitable holding?" "Yes. And you will vacate the property voluntarily within 90 days?" "I will." He signed the paperwork. That evening he sent one final message to Sienna. "Next meeting will be our last. We have some final decisions to discuss." Her reply came fast. "We are ready. And again, thank you. You saved us." Harold looked out the window toward the garden. The roses had gone still in the windless dusk. "Saved you?" "No." "You saved yourself from foreclosure, but you lost something far more valuable. You lost your father's trust. And now, you will lose the rest." Harold locked the garden gate that night, not to keep anyone out, but to prepare for the moment they would try to get back in. The lawyer's office was made of glass and silence. Harold sat across from the notary while final documents were reviewed. The trust transfer was in motion. The property, this house, these rooms, the garden where Martha had planted hope, would soon be moved to the Butler Legacy Trust, a charitable structure designed years ago but never activated. The clause from Martha's will had not been decorative. It had been intentional, a line drawn in legal ink to protect what she knew Harold might be too patient to defend with anger. She had written, "If my husband is ever pressured, guilted, or emotionally manipulated to surrender his home following my death, I instruct the transfer of our primary residence to the trust. Its purpose shall be to protect dignity, not to preserve ownership." The attorney, a woman named Elise Chen, slid the final documents across the table. "Once you sign these, Mr. Butler, your role becomes trustee, not owner. No one, not even your daughter, can claim legal interest in the property."
"Not while you live."
Not after. Harold did not hesitate. He signed. Back home, he placed the trust paperwork in Martha's old recipe box, a symbolic place for something sacred. She had cooked love into every corner of their lives. Now that love had become architecture. The following morning, a text arrived from Sienna. "Can we come by tonight? We want to update you on counseling and work stuff. Dinner's on us." He replied simply, 7 sharp. They arrived exactly on time, clutching a paper bag of takeout and 2 hopeful smiles. Perry had shaved. Sienna wore her hair the way Martha used to braid it on hard days. "We brought your favorite, Dad," she said as she unpacked the containers. "Thai from the old place. Extra basil. No peanuts." Harold gestured to the table. They sat like guests in a house they once tried to claim. "We started counseling last week," Sienna began. "A licensed therapist, twice weekly. We are doing the homework. Really talking." Perry nodded. "And I picked up 2 gigs. Not permanent, but better than nothing. We are cutting expenses, too." Harold listened, took mental notes, watched how they fidgeted less now, but blinked more. The guilt had not disappeared. It had simply changed form, from arrogance to anxiety. "There's something else," Sienna added. "We found a new place, smaller, more manageable. If we can keep the house for just 6 more months, we can sell and clear most of the debts. We are trying to do this right." Harold nodded. "I am glad to hear that." He stood and returned with 2 envelopes, one for each of them. They exchanged glances, then opened the papers. The first was a payment update. Installment 1 had been logged. Installment 2 had been delayed. "Why is this blank?" Sienna asked, pointing to the empty payment date. "Because I am not releasing the second installment." Perry sat back. "I thought we agreed to terms." "One of them was honesty." Sienna's brow furrowed. "We have been honest, have you?" Harold produced a new set of documents, credit monitoring printouts, 3 new inquiries, 2 declined loans, 1 maxed-out card. "Your attempts to secure additional credit using my co-signed accounts violate our agreement. We thought we could consolidate," Sienna said quickly. "Just until the next payment cleared, you thought you could leverage my name again without permission." Perry stood. "You think we're lying? After everything? After signing your stupid contract?" Harold remained seated. "The contract is valid, but so is the clause in Martha's will." He placed the final folder on the table. "This house is no longer my personal asset. As of yesterday, it belongs to the Butler Legacy Trust." Perry's mouth dropped. "What are you talking about?" "I transferred ownership. I am now the trustee. You have no claim, no leverage, no future inheritance. You cannot do that," Sienna whispered. "I already have. This is revenge." Sienna's voice cracked. "You're punishing us. No, this is consequence." Harold stood, walked slowly to the window. The garden was quiet tonight. No wind, no sound. Just roses, patient and waiting. "When I was asked to leave my own home after my wife died, I made a decision. Not to fight, but to remember. Remember what? Everything, every dollar, every gift. Every time I bailed you out, every time you used love as leverage, every time you twisted my silence into permission." Sienna covered her mouth. Her eyes welled. Perry stayed frozen, not in shock but in calculation. "You planned this? From the moment I opened my mouth at that dinner?" "Correct. You told me to pack my bags and disappear. So I did. I disappeared behind documents, behind legal walls, behind the very systems you thought I had forgotten how to use," Sienna whispered. "What happens now? Now you are free. Free from debt you created. Free from the expectation that I will solve your problems. Free to build your future without assuming mine belongs to you, but the money is gone. The check was real. The help was real. But the lesson is permanent." She wiped a tear. "Can we ever fix this?" "That depends on what you mean by fix. Our relationship." Harold turned. "You must understand something. I am not angry. I am not cruel. I am finished." Sienna's voice broke. "I was your little girl, and you used that phrase as currency, until it lost all value." She looked at Perry, as if expecting a defense. He had none. They stood together, no longer a unit of power. Just 2 people who had run out of backup plans. "Thank you for the meal," Harold said, returning to his chair. The basil was perfect. They left without another word. The door closed. The night returned. Harold walked to the garden and clipped one of Martha's roses, brought it inside, placed it in the small vase beside her photograph. "You were right," he said aloud. "They thought silence meant surrender." He reached for the envelope where she had written the original clause. Below her signature, he added his own line. "Love is a gift, but it is not a blank check." The next morning, Harold received an email alert from the credit bureau. Perry had tried again. This time, it triggered something else. The credit alert arrived at 6:03 a.m., the time when desperate men make silent moves, hoping the system still sees them as solvent. But systems don't forget, especially not the ones Harold still monitored. The message was brief. Flagged activity on co-signed account. Attempted auto loan. Status: denied. Perry had tried to use Harold's name again, this time for a vehicle. This time after signing a document explicitly prohibiting such use. Harold stared at the screen, unmoved. The desperation was no longer theoretical. It was now habitual. By noon another alert arrived, this one from the credit monitoring service itself. Third-party risk pattern detected. Associated accounts may be entering distress loop. Translation: Perry and Sienna were failing repeatedly, and the algorithm had begun marking them as financial contagion. Each denial made the next less likely. Every application was a nail in the credit coffin. At 3:00 p.m., a voicemail pinged. Sienna's voice. Tight, controlled, pretending normal. "Hi, Dad. I know we made a mistake with that auto loan. Perry thought the terms would be different. It was a misclick. We're sorry. Can we stop by tomorrow to talk? Harold did not reply. Instead, he sat in Martha's chair and reviewed their contract. Clause 5. Any unauthorized credit activity would suspend assistance indefinitely. Clause 7. Any attempt to use the cosigner's name for gain would nullify the agreement entirely. The terms had been clear. What they had not expected, what neither of them ever accounted for, was that Harold would enforce those terms. That night, he went to the rose garden, not to prune, just to observe. The blooms were wider now, full and red, too vivid for their own safety. Martha had always said the strongest flowers drew the sharpest storms. He slept easily. No guilt, no hesitation. At 7 the next morning, the doorbell rang. He answered slowly, as if time itself bent to his will. Sienna and Perry stood on the porch. They looked different now, less like a couple and more like cellmates. Her eyes were tired. His hands were shaking. "We need to talk," Sienna said. Harold gestured to the living room. No pleasantries, no drinks, just the three of them, and the space between who they had been and who they were now. "We know we messed up," Sienna began, "but we are trying. You saw the apology? We signed everything. Counseling is helping." "That is good," Harold said, "but we need the second check, just to hold things together a little longer. You violated the agreement." "It was a misunderstanding," Perry cut in. "I thought I could list you as an income source, not a cosigner." "That was not a misunderstanding. That was fraud." Perry's jaw tightened. "Is this who you are now?" Harold stood, walked to the desk, and retrieved a new document. 1 page, printed in bold. Notice of contract termination. He handed it to Sienna. "What is this?" "The end of the arrangement. The loan, the conditions. All of it. Voided. You cannot just pull it back." "Yes, I can. And I have." Sienna's lip trembled. "Please, Dad, we're begging." "Begging now? 2 weeks ago, you told me to leave my own home. We were scared, and now you're terrified. That is the progression of consequence. You're punishing us." "No. I am demonstrating what happens when trust is treated like furniture. Moved, discarded, and assumed replaceable." Perry stood, his hands clenched. "You are a bitter old man playing king of a crumbling castle." Harold stepped closer. "No, I am the man who co-signed your life into existence and can legally unravel it piece by piece." Sienna sobbed now. Perry paced. "You cannot do this. There are laws. And I have followed them all. You think this is justice? No, this is proportion." Harold opened a second folder. Inside were the court-ready copies of the trust transfer. The house was now out of reach. Permanently. You were counting on an inheritance. You were hoping I'd forgive out of loneliness. You bet against my intelligence, and we lost. Yes. And now the debt has matured." Perry turned, kicked the coffee table. Harold did not flinch. "Leave. We have nowhere to go. That was your choice." Sienna's shoulders sagged. "So that is it." "No, that is the consequence of it." They walked out without slamming the door. Even rage had become too heavy for them to lift. That evening, Harold returned to the garden. He sat among the blooms, reading Martha's notebook. Near the end, he found an entry written in shaky script. "If they choose ambition over affection, remember this. You taught them love. You did not teach them to weaponize it. That was their doing." The moonlight was soft that night. Not gentle, just honest. At midnight, a new message arrived. From Sienna. 1 line. "Do you hate me, Dad?" He did not reply, because hate requires emotion. And Harold had already spent every ounce of emotion on people who saw him as a fallback plan. This was not hate. This was closure. The next morning, the mail arrived. Inside, a foreclosure notice. Not addressed to Harold, but to the couple who had bet everything on kindness, and lost. The envelope was white, unassuming, but heavy with finality. Harold held it in his hands like a piece of history. The bold lettering across the top read, "Notice of intent to foreclose." It was not addressed to him. It was addressed to Perry Morgan and Sienna Marie Morgan, care of the property they had once tried to claim. Harold opened it anyway, not out of pettiness, out of necessity. The document listed dates, missed payments, default thresholds, standard language, all of it clinical. But between the lines was a story written in arrogance and assumption. A couple who had built their life on someone else's foundation and expected no structural cracks. 60 days. That was the final grace period. Harold filed the letter in his cabinet under a new label. Irrevocable. He returned to the garden. The blooms were fading now, petals curling at the edges. The season was changing, slowly, inevitably. That afternoon his phone rang. Sienna. He did not answer. She left a voicemail. Her voice sounded quieter this time. Smaller. Dad. We got the letter. I do not know what to do. I know you warned us. I know. But I did not think it would come to this. Please call me, please. Harold saved the message. He did not respond. Instead, he returned to Martha's notebook. Read her final entries. One in particular had always struck him. Some lessons arrive late, and some have to be paid for in full. The next day, Sienna appeared unannounced. She stood on the porch, shoulders hunched. No makeup, no performance. Just raw desperation. Harold opened the door but did not move aside. I just want to talk, she said. You are talking now. Tears filled her eyes. I know we did this. I know we broke everything, but I am your daughter. I'm still your daughter, are you? She flinched. I remember a little girl who cried when I missed her soccer game, who used to crawl into my lap when it rained, who asked me once if I'd always protect her. Sienna wiped her cheek. I'm still her. No. You are the woman who sat silent while her husband told her grieving father to pack his bags and disappear, who turned a house built with love into a ledger, who asked for inheritance like it was owed. I made mistakes. You made calculations. She looked past him toward the garden. Mom would want you to forgive me. Harold stepped aside, gestured toward the table where the trust documents were neatly stacked. Your mother wanted you to learn the value of legacy, so she left a clause, one you never knew existed. He handed her the page. Sienna read it. Her face paled. Her knees buckled slightly and she sat without asking. She started but couldn't finish. Your mother anticipated this, not the specifics, but the shape of it, the betrayal, the greed. The moment love would be used as a bargaining chip, the trust. It is active. The house is no longer in my name. It belongs to a cause she chose, not to you. Sienna pressed her palms into her eyes. I do not care about the house. Not anymore. I just want you back, do you? I do. Then why did you only say it after the check stopped? After the doors closed? Because I was scared. You still are. But not of losing me. Of losing the lifestyle you built on borrowed generosity. She looked up. Her face streaked with tears. What now? Now you start over alone? Yes, she stood slowly, looked around the house. The photos. The old chair. The light in the hallway. I remember everything here. So do I. I do not want to lose you. Then you should have protected what you had, before you priced it like property. Harold walked to the door, opened it. Sienna stood there a moment longer, then stepped out, wordless. He closed it softly. The next morning brought silence. No calls, no texts, just stillness. At noon, he received an email from Elise Chen. Subject line, Trust fully executed. Beneath it, a line from Martha's will included as reference, To my husband. This is my last protection. Use it when love is not enough. Harold printed the email, filed it, then sat in the chair beside Martha's photo. He whispered to the quiet room, You saw it all coming. You were the gardener. I was just the soil. Outside, the first autumn wind stirred the roses. Petals fell like soft warnings. That evening, Harold checked his voicemail. No messages, and for the first time in weeks, he smiled. Harold stood by the kitchen window, watching the roses drop their last defiant petals onto the wind-brushed soil. It was October now. The heat had finally surrendered. The light looked different, softer, sadder. Even the house breathed differently, quieter, still. Inside, the documents lay in perfect order, every asset secured, every clause triggered, every loose end either tied off or left to rot where it fell. He had spent the last week finalizing the estate's conversion. The house, now under trust ownership, had been registered with the Butler Legacy Foundation. The transition had been clean, seamless, inevitable. The only thing left was the letter. It sat on his desk in a cream envelope. No address, no postage, just one name, Sienna. He had rewritten it 3 times. The first draft was too bitter, the second too hollow. But the third, this version was surgical. It was not meant to hurt her. It was meant to show her what hurt had built. He sealed the envelope and placed it in the mailbox at the end of the drive. He did not wait for the carrier. He did not track the delivery. Some messages needed to arrive without ceremony. That night, he brewed his tea and sat in Martha's chair. The house hummed with old warmth. Ghosts lived here now, not of death, but of memory. He imagined Martha standing in the kitchen, apron dusted with flour, humming her off-key tunes. He imagined Sienna as a child, darting through the hallway with tangled hair and sticky fingers. Then he remembered her silence at the dinner table, and the way Perry had smirked. That moment had never left him. It had embedded itself beneath his ribs like a bone fragment. Martha's death had hollowed him, but their betrayal had finished the excavation. 2 days passed before the knock came. Not a loud one. Hesitant. Rehearsed. Harold opened the door. Sienna stood there, alone, no car in sight, no purse, just her, holding the cream envelope with both hands. She said nothing. He gestured for her to come in. They sat at the table. No food, no drinks, just distance and decades between them. She held up the envelope. I read it. Twice. Harold waited. I thought I wanted money, or the house. But I think I just wanted your approval again, like when I was 12 and made the honor roll. He nodded once. But when I didn't get it, I tried to fill the space with things, loans, vacations, projects. Perry fed that. But it started with me. She paused, looked up. Is it too late? That depends on what you're asking. To fix this. To start again. Harold leaned forward, placed his hands flat on the table. There is no going back. Only forward. But forward means accepting what you broke, not asking me to forget it. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Good. Because forgiveness is not the point. Then what is? Awareness. Accountability. And then, maybe, one day, trust. She blinked hard, nodded. And if I do that, then we speak again. She smiled, thin and tired. You said in the letter that Mom saw this coming. She did? Why didn't you? Because I thought love was enough. And it wasn't, it was, until it became a weapon. Silence. Sienna looked around the room like it had changed shape. I miss her every day. So do I. Do you think she'd be proud of this? Of you? No, of this. Of what happened. Of how it all ended. Harold stood, walked to the fireplace, took down the framed photo of Martha in the garden. He turned it around. On the back was a handwritten note, dated a month before her death. If love cannot protect him, this trust must. I don't want revenge. I want preservation. He handed the photo to Sienna. She read it. Her lips pressed tight. Then she spoke. One last question. Did you ever consider just letting it all go? Harold looked out the window. Every day. And then I remember how quiet the room went when you let him speak for you. Sienna nodded. Stood. I don't deserve your kindness. No, he said. But maybe one day you will earn it back. She left quietly. No promises, no tears, just the letter still folded in her hand. That night, Harold placed the photo of Martha back on the mantel, but he did not face it forward. Not yet. November brought stillness, the kind of stillness Harold had not felt since Martha's diagnosis. No more late-night credit alerts, no desperate voicemails, no footsteps on the porch, just autumn air, the dry rustle of garden leaves, and a house that finally felt like itself again. He moved through it like a caretaker now, not a resident. The walls did not carry sorrow anymore, only echoes, gentle ones. The trust had shifted more than ownership. It had given the house purpose, a future that did not include being inherited, flipped, or fought over. The Butler Legacy Trust's charter was simple. Preserve the house. Fund scholarship grants for local students. Maintain the garden as a quiet memorial to Martha. She had always wanted to be remembered in bloom. Harold stood on the porch that morning, watching volunteers unload crates of mulch and rose feed. 2 students, both on full-ride grants, waved politely before heading toward the garden beds. One of them wore headphones. The other sang softly under her breath, unaware anyone could hear her. Harold smiled. Martha would have liked that. Inside, he sat with his tea and reviewed the final documents from the lawyer. Everything was closed, sealed, unchallengeable. The doorbell rang at noon. He expected it. Sienna stood there, hands in her coat pockets. A little older now, or perhaps just a little more honest in her sadness. She had not spoken to him in 3 weeks. No calls, no emails, but he knew this visit would come. He nodded for her to enter. She carried a folder. Simple, worn, not unlike the ones Harold had kept for years. She handed it to him. "I sold the car," she said, "paid off the utilities, canceled the credit cards. I'm moving into a studio next month. No cosigner, no shortcuts." Harold opened the folder. Inside was her new budget, handwritten, every dollar accounted for. No projections, just truth. "I've taken a job. Customer support? Not glamorous, but honest." He closed the folder. "Good." They sat across from each other in the living room. The same chairs, the same soft light, but no illusions between them now. Sienna looked around. "I used to think this house would be mine someday. It never was. I know that now." She hesitated. "I miss Mom." "So do I. I miss you, too. I'm still here. Not like before." "No, not like before." She leaned forward slightly. "You've built something. With the trust. With the house, I didn't understand that at first. But I do now. It's not just yours anymore. It's hers. And you're guarding it." Harold nodded once. "That's the only way to keep it alive." She exhaled slowly. "You said something once, about inheritance. That love is not a blank check." He looked at her directly. "It's not, but it can still be a map." Sienna blinked, and tears rimmed her eyes. "I'm sorry it took losing everything to see that. Some people never see it at all." She stood.
"Slowly. I'm not asking for anything." "Good. I just wanted you to know."
"I'm trying. I believe you." She stepped toward the door, paused. "If you ever need anything at all, you can call me. I'll remember that." She left without another word. Harold did not follow. He returned to the mantel, picked up the photo of Martha, turned it forward for the first time in months. She smiled back at him, not like a ghost, like an anchor. Later that week, he hosted the first scholarship dinner. 10 students, 2 professors, local officials. No fanfare, just names, stories, and plans. Plans that would outlive him. One student pulled him aside afterward. "Why did you start the foundation, Mr. Butler?" Harold looked out the window, toward the roses, the garden, the house. "Because something once tried to take all this from me, and I decided to build something no one could ever take again." And in the stillness of that legacy, Harold found the only revenge that ever truly lasted, being remembered for protecting what others had tried to steal. If Harold's path, from grief to grit, silence to strategy, hit something in you, like the video, subscribe for more, and share it with someone who needs to remember kindness isn't weakness, and silence isn't surrender. Tell me in the comments, have you ever helped someone who tried to erase you?